For centuries, the galaxy told stories about humans as if they were myths, whispered by old navigators who had spent too long between stars. They were called legends, not because they were admired, but because no one had seen them in generations. Most believed humanity had burned itself out in ancient wars, or retreated into obscurity after failing to compete with faster evolving species. The Galactic Concord archived humanity under extinct or irrelevant civilizations, and moved on without regret. In the great halls of the Concord, where crystalline species debated trade routes and border skirmishes, humans were remembered only as footnotes. They had been stubborn, resilient, and dangerously creative, but ultimately too divided to survive, or so the records claimed. Young cadets laughed at the idea that humans once challenged early interstellar powers with crude fleets and unrefined tactics. Their weapons were primitive, their ships inefficient, and their political unity non-existent, or so the instructors said. Across the spiral arm, the Valari Dominion expanded with calculated precision. Their fleets were elegant and merciless, optimized for conquest and assimilation. When Valari scouts encountered abandoned human systems filled with rusting stations and silent worlds, they took it as confirmation of humanity's end. The Dominion annexed these systems without resistance and stripped them for resources. Yet something about those empty worlds, unsettled veteran commanders, human structures were scarred but intact, as if built to endure time itself. Deep vaults remained sealed by codes no Valari algorithm could crack. Some ruins showed signs of evacuation rather than collapse. Still, the Dominion dismissed these details as irrelevant. Empires were not built on caution but on certainty, and certainty told them that humans were gone. Legends faded, and the galaxy had no room for ghosts. Far beyond mapped space, hidden behind gravitational anomalies and artificial stellar veils, humanity endured. They watched the galaxy that had ridden them off. They remembered every betrayal, every broken treaty, and every lesson learned the hard way. Their exile was not defeat, but preparation. While the galaxy evolved along predictable paths, humans chose unpredictability. They rebuilt, not for conquest, but for survival against everything the galaxy might become. And when the time came, they would not announce their return with words. They would let their fleet speak instead. The first warning came as static across Valari long-range sensors. At the edge of the Caro's expanse, gravitational readings began to fluctuate in impossible patterns. Stars appeared to bend light incorrectly, as if reality itself was being folded. Valari analysts assumed a natural anomaly and continued their patrol schedules. Then, the horizon changed. Space darkened, not with shadow, but with mass. Something vast was arriving without conventional warp signatures. No jump flashes, no energy spikes, just presence. Commanders stared at their displays as the void filled with silhouettes, hundreds of them at first, then thousands. Ships of unfamiliar design emerged as if unfolding from nothingness. Angular hulls layered with adaptive armor, glowing with restrained power. The fleet did not form traditional attack lines. Instead, it arranged itself like a living organism, fluid and deliberate. Each vessel moved with quiet confidence, as if every possible outcome had already been calculated. Valari Command struggled to classify the ships. Weapons scans returned errors. Shield readings exceeded theoretical limits. Propulsion systems ignored known physical constraints. It was as if the fleet had been designed by a species that had spent centuries preparing for every known enemy. A single transmission pierced Valari channels. The signal was simple, unencrypted, and unmistakably human. It carried no threats, no demands, no negotiation, only a statement of presence. The realization spread through the Dominion like panic, disguised as disbelief. Humans were not extinct. Humans were not diminished. Humans had returned. Older officers remembered the legends then. Stories of humans who adapted faster than anyone else, who turned defeat into doctrine and survival into science, who learned more from loss than others learned from victory. As the human fleet advanced, the stars themselves seemed to retreat. Valari fleets mobilized in response, confident in numbers and doctrine. They had conquered 1,000 species. One more would change nothing, but this was not conquest arriving. This was something else entirely. This was a reckoning moving silently across the horizon. The Valari fired first. Protocol demanded overwhelming force against unknown threats. Energy lances streaked across the void, bright and devastating. They struck the human vanguard without hesitation. The impacts were spectacular and meaningless. Human shields absorbed the assault, not by resisting it but by dispersing it. Energy was redirected, diffused, and recycled in ways Valari science could not comprehend. The human fleet did not slow. Then humanity responded. There was no dramatic charge or visible fury, just precise, coordinated action across thousands of ships. Weapon systems activated in perfect silence. Kinetic strikes followed vectors that ignored traditional evasion models. Valari ships were pierced, not where shields were weakest, but where commanders felt safest. Electronic warfare crippled entire squadrons before they realized they were under attack. Fleet cohesion collapsed within moments. Human tactics were not aggressive in the conventional sense. They were corrective. Each strike removed a threat with minimal excess, as if the humans were pruning a dangerous growth rather than waging war. Valari commanders attempted countermeasures. They adapted their formations, increased firepower, and deployed reserve fleets. Nothing worked. Every adjustment was anticipated. Every tactic mirrored and nullified. The truth became undeniable. Humans had studied the galaxy while hidden. They had mapped every doctrine, every weakness, every predictable response. Their fleet was not just advanced, it was tailored. Boarding actions were attempted and failed catastrophically. Human marines moved with terrifying efficiency. They did not shout or boast. They completed his objectives and withdrew, leaving silence behind. Captured Valari officers reported the same thing. Humans were calm, focused, and deeply disappointed. Not hateful, not cruel, disappointed that the galaxy had learned nothing in their absence. As the battle ended, the Valari fleet lay shattered. Survivors retreated in disarray. The legends had not exaggerated humanity. They had underestimated them. Asterisk in the aftermath. Human ships did not pursue fleeing enemies. Instead, they held position, forming a visible presence across key systems. Relays, once controlled by the Valari Dominion, were quietly reclaimed. Human engineers restored ancient infrastructure with ease. Then the message was broadcast galaxy-wide. It used every known language and several that had long been forgotten. It carried no threats and no promises of domination, only history and warning. Humanity explained its disappearance. They spoke of early alliances betrayed, of wars fought to exhaustion against multiple powers, of the decision to withdraw rather than burn the galaxy in retaliation. They admitted their flaws openly: division, arrogance, and short-sighted ambition. But they also spoke of what those failures taught them: unity without uniformity, strength without cruelty, power without recklessness. The message was clear. Humanity had not returned to rule. They had returned to ensure survival, theirs and everyone else's. They warned that the galaxy was approaching a convergence of threats: extragalactic forces, unstable technologies, and self-destructive expansion. Threats humanity had already encountered in the dark beyond known space. Threats that would consume all civilizations if left unchecked. The human fleet was not an invasion force. It was a shield, a final line built by a species that had already faced extinction and refused to repeat it. Join us, or stand aside, the message implied. Across the galaxy, ancient powers reconsidered their assumptions. Younger species felt hope for the first time in generations. And those who had built empires on fear felt something unfamiliar: uncertainty. Legends were supposed to stay in the past, but humanity had returned not as a story. They returned as a choice the galaxy now had to make. Asterisk years later. Historians would struggle to describe the moment everything changed. Some would say it was the first battle, others the broadcast that followed. But most agreed it began when the galaxy realized humans had never truly left. Alliances reshaped themselves around human strategic networks. Trade routes stabilized under human protection. Conflicts that once escalated into extinction-level wars were quietly diffused. Not through force alone, but through understanding born of hard experience. Human fleets became a common sight, not looming conquerors, but vigilant guardians. They intervened only when necessary, and when they did, the outcome was decisive and restrained. The Valari Dominion survived, diminished, but wiser. They became one of humanity's strongest allies, having learned humility through defeat and respect through survival. New legends formed among young species. Stories of humans who faced annihilation and chose patience, who turned exile into evolution, and returned not for vengeance, but responsibility. Humanity itself changed as well. They no longer saw themselves as the center of the galaxy, but as its custodians, a role earned through suffering rather than destiny. The horizon would never look the same again. Where once there was fear of the unknown, now there was vigilance, paired with hope, because the legends had proven something vital. Humans were not legends until their fleet appeared.